Hello. Odette? Her voice sounded older, friendlier than I remembered. Is it really you? It's me, Mom. Oh, thank goodness. Meredith said she saw you, that you looked well. I've been trying to reach you. I swallowed hard. This is the first call I've had from you in years. Silence, then a shaky inhale. Griffin said, he told me you changed your number. That you didn't want us to contact you after what happened with your job. Of course he had. Another lie to add to the collection. My number hasn't changed, I said quietly. I see. Her voice had a new edge to it, anger, but not directed at me for once. There seems to be a lot Griffin hasn't been truthful about. Meredith told me, about Northwestern. About the letters. I said nothing, waiting. I should have known better, she continued. Your father always said Griffin was jealous of you. I never believed it. I thought he was just being protective of you. That he knew what was best. Mom, I said carefully, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you know Griffin told me to leave his house that night? During the storm, when I had nowhere else to go. Her sharp intake of breath was answer enough. He said you left on your own. That you'd found a friend to stay with and just left without saying goodbye. He said you were being dramatic. I closed my eyes, letting the confirmation wash over me. He called me dead weight, Mom. He told me I was a burden. Always had been. Oh, Odette. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I believed him. Your brother said you'd abandoned us. I'm sorry I believed him. The apology, so long overdue, landed with surprising lightness. Not healing the wound entirely, but acknowledging it existed. I'm sorry too, Mom, I said softly. For not trying harder to reach you. We talked for nearly an hour. She told me about her health struggles, about the loneliness of her big house now that most of her friends had moved to retirement communities in Florida or Arizona. I told her about my new apartment, carefully omitting any mention of the lottery or my financial situation. Could I see you? She asked as our conversation wound down. Not right away, if you're not ready. But someday soon. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Maybe next month. After we hung up, I drove to my old neighborhood. Not to the house where I'd grown up. I wasn't ready for that, but to the park 3 blocks away where Dad used to take me for Saturday morning walks. I sat on a bench facing the old duck pond, watching the last rays of sunlight ripple across the water. This was where Dad had taught me to skip stones, his patient hands guiding mine until I'd mastered the perfect flick of the wrist. Where he'd shown me how to identify different bird calls. Where we'd sat in companionable silence, reading our respective books on lazy summer afternoons. How different might my life have been if he'd lived? If I'd gone to Northwestern? If I'd never believed the lies Griffin had fed me about my own worth? As dusk settled over the park, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Griffin. We need to talk. Everything's falling apart. You were right. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just self-pity and an assumption that I would come running to help, as I always had before. I didn't reply. The next day, I met Elliot for coffee, a first outside the boundaries of his bookstore. He'd suggested it casually after I'd returned my latest poetry volume. I'm closing early today for a dental appointment, he'd said. But if you wanted to continue our discussion about Neruda, we could grab coffee at Westbrook Cafe around 4. We sat at a corner table, sunlight streaming through the window catching the silver in his hair. He talked about poetry, about the struggling book industry, about his plans to start a reading series at the store. I found myself telling him about my publishing background, my love of editing and helping authors shape their work. Why did you leave publishing? He asked, stirring his coffee. The simple question cracked something open in me. Maybe it was the genuine interest in his eyes, or the weeks of quiet friendship we'd built, or simply the fact that I was tired of carrying secrets. I was laid off, I said quietly. Right before, everything changed. Everything changed, he echoed. And so I told him. Not everything, not about the lottery, but about Griffin, about the storm, about being called dead weight and thrown away by my only brother when I needed him most. I sat in this horrible motel room, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, soaking wet and completely alone. And I realized I had been alone for a long time before that night. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Elliot reached across the table and covered my hand with his. I'm sorry, Odette. I froze. What did you call me? A small, sad smile touched his lips. I've known for a while. Your library card fell out of your purse a few weeks ago when you were paying for a book. I saw the name. Why didn't you say anything? He shrugged. People have reasons for what they do. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. I felt tears spill over, running unchecked down my cheeks. For the first time since that night in the motel, I sobbed openly, not the quiet, contained tears I'd allowed myself in private, but deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from some broken place I'd been afraid to touch. Elliot moved to sit beside me, his arm around my shoulders as I broke down in the quiet cafe. He didn't try to hush me or offer empty platitudes. He just held space for my grief, for all the years of rejection and disappointment that had culminated in that rainy night. I'm sorry, I gasped when I could finally speak again. I don't know where that came from. I do, he said gently. It came from exactly where it needed to. We sat in silence until my breathing steadied. Then he handed me a napkin to dry my eyes. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're the opposite of dead weight. You're one of the most alive people I've met in a long time. The next morning, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from a woman named Laurel Matthews in Ohio, someone I'd never met. Dear anonymous benefactor, it began. I don't know who you are or how you knew about my situation, but the donation you made to my medical fund saved more than just my financial future. It saved my life. She went on to explain that she was the mother of one of the shelter dogs I'd helped find a home for months ago. The dog had been adopted by a family visiting from Ohio. When they'd mentioned the shelter to her, she looked it up online and discovered a testimonial from someone who'd received help from the emergency fund I'd established. You changed everything, she wrote. And you don't even know me. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling something shift and settle within me. The money I'd won hadn't erased the pain of Griffin's rejection or the years of feeling invisible in my own family. But it had given me the power to ensure others didn't feel that same aloneness, that same despair. For the first time since winning the lottery, I smiled, not because of what the money could buy me, but because of what it allowed me to give. And more importantly, I realized my healing no longer depended on Griffin's apology or acknowledgement. It was entirely in my own hands. Sometimes rock bottom is the best mirror. The news about Griffin's downfall came in waves over the next few weeks. First, the investigation expanded from client complaints to allegations of tax fraud and misrepresentation of credentials. Then came the announcement that his license had been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. I followed the story from a distance, neither gloating nor grieving. It felt like watching the collapse of a stranger's life, connected to me by blood and history, but separated by the chasm his cruelty had created. Local news reported that Griffin had been forced to sell his home in the upscale suburb, where he'd turned me away. Property records confirmed the sale, at well below market value, suggesting desperation rather than choice. Through my mother's cautious updates during our now weekly phone calls, I learned that Griffin had initially tried to move in with her. I told him no, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. Can you believe that? I actually stood up to him. Said I needed my space and my peace. I'm proud of you, Mom, I said, meaning it. It wasn't just for me, she admitted. After what he did to you. I couldn't reward that. Not anymore. Our relationship was healing slowly. We'd met twice for lunch, careful, measured encounters where we stuck to safe topics and avoided mentioning Griffin directly. She didn't ask where my money was coming from, though I could see the question in her eyes when I picked up the check or mentioned my volunteer work. I let her assume I'd found another job in publishing, working remotely. It was easier than the truth. On a crisp autumn day 6 months after winning the lottery, I received an invitation to a charity gala supporting literary education in underserved communities. It had been forwarded from my old workplace. Apparently, my name was still on their mailing list. Normally, I would have ignored it, but the venue caught my eye. The Grand Ballroom at the Westbrook Hotel, just 3 blocks from my apartment. On impulse, I decided to go. I bought a simple but elegant black dress, nothing flashy. I wasn't there to be noticed, just to support a cause I believed in and maybe reconnect with some former colleagues in a neutral setting. The ballroom was transformed for the evening, with twinkling lights and towering floral arrangements. I sipped champagne and made polite conversation with a few familiar faces from the publishing world, carefully answering questions about what I'd been doing since leaving Horizon. Freelance editing, I said vaguely. And some volunteer work. I was examining the silent auction items when I heard a familiar laugh that made my blood run cold. Turning slowly, I saw Brin across the room, surrounded by a small group of women I didn't recognize. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, her smile brittle around the edges. I moved toward the exit, hoping to slip away unnoticed, but she looked up at that exact moment. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition flash across her face, followed immediately by panic. Too late to escape now. I straightened my shoulders and nodded once in acknowledgement, then turned back to the auction table. Footsteps approached from behind. Odette? Brin's voice was artificially bright. Is that you? What a surprise. I turned, my face carefully neutral. Hello, Brin. You look good, she said, her eyes traveling over my dress, my carefully styled hair. Are you working here tonight? For the event company. The assumption that I could only be present as staff, not a guest, was so typically Brin that I almost laughed. No, I said simply. I'm a donor. Confusion flickered across her face. Oh, that's wonderful. How have you been? We were so worried when you left so suddenly. The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. I studied her face, searching for any sign of shame or remorse, but found only social panic, the fear of being exposed as unkind in a public setting. Were you? I asked quietly. Worried, I mean. When Griffin told me I was dead weight and made me leave during a thunderstorm with nowhere to go. She blanched, glancing around to see if anyone had overheard. That's not, you're exaggerating. You know how Griffin gets when he's stressed. He didn't mean. I'm not interested in what he meant, Brin, I interrupted, my voice steady. Only what he did. What you both did. She shifted uncomfortably. Look, Griffin's going through a really difficult time right now. The allegations against him are completely unfair. He's being targeted because of his success. Is that why you left him? I asked, the information slipping out before I could stop myself. Her eyes widened. How did you? Small world, I said with a slight shrug. I hear things. We're taking a break, she said stiffly. It's complicated. Not that it's any of your business. You're right. It's not. I set down my champagne glass. If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to speak with. Wait, she said, grabbing my arm. Have you talked to Griffin recently? He's been trying to reach you. No, I said, gently removing her hand. And I don't intend to. He needs family right now, she pressed. He's lost everything, his business, his reputation. He's staying in some awful studio apartment in Millfield. Millfield. The same neighborhood where I'd lived when I was laid off. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed family too, Brin. 6 months ago, in the rain, with $12 to my name. Where was Griffin then? She had no answer for that. I walked away, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. Outside in the cool night air, I took deep breaths until the trembling in my hands subsided. I'd faced Brin without breaking, without letting her see how much power her words, and Griffin's, still held over me. It felt like another kind of victory, smaller but no less significant than that night in the motel when I'd discovered the winning ticket. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. It's Griffin. We need to talk. Please, Odette. I've lost everything. I have no one left. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without reply. 2 days later, my mother called, her voice tight with distress. Griffin showed up at my house last night. Drunk. Demanding money. Are you okay? I asked, immediately concerned. Did he hurt you? No. Just scared me. I called the police, and they escorted him off the property. She sounded exhausted. He kept saying it was all your fault. That if you'd helped him when he first reached out, none of this would have happened. The familiar weight of guilt threatened to settle on my shoulders, but I shrugged it off. That's not true, Mom. Griffin's choices are his own. I know that now, she said quietly. I never thought I'd have to call the police on my own son. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the cardinal that had made its home in the oak tree. It flitted from branch to branch, bright red against the green leaves, completely unaware of human drama unfolding below. I thought about Griffin, about how our paths had diverged so drastically. He'd had every advantage: our mother's favor, financial support through college, connections through her family to start his business. I'd had Dad's love, yes, but after he died, I'd been truly on my own. And yet, I was the one sitting in a peaceful apartment with financial security, while Griffin was spiraling into self-destruction. Not because I was better or more deserving, but because I'd never built my worth on tearing others down. I'd never defined my success by comparison. Even before the lottery, I'd found joy in small things: a good book, a beautiful sunset, moments of connection with others. The irony wasn't lost on me. Griffin, who had everything, had never learned to appreciate any of it. And I, who had so little for so long, had somehow learned to find abundance in the smallest moments. Later that week, I was walking home from the bookstore when I glimpsed a familiar figure on a bench near the park. Griffin sat hunched over, wearing what appeared to be the same suit I'd seen him in at his house months ago, though now it hung loosely on his frame. His hair was unkempt, his face unshaven. I could have crossed the street to avoid him. Part of me wanted to. But something held me in place, not sympathy exactly, but a need for closure I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. He looked up as I approached, recognition and disbelief washing over his haggard face. "Odette?" His voice was rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. I stopped a few feet from the bench, maintaining a safe distance. "Griffin, how did you find me?" he asked, straightening slightly. "I didn't. I live nearby." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "In Westbrook? How can you afford that? Last I heard, you were unemployed and broke." Even now, even at his lowest, his first instinct was to question my capability, to look for ways to diminish me. "Things change," I said simply. He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Yeah, they sure do. Look at me now. Sleeping on a friend's couch. License suspended. Bank accounts frozen." He gestured to himself. "All that work, all those years of building something, gone in an instant." "I know something about that," I said quietly. "About losing everything overnight." He had the grace to look away, a flicker of shame crossing his face. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know. You didn't answer." "No." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I need help, Odette. I know I don't deserve it after what happened. But I have nowhere else to turn." "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Money. Just a loan until I get back on my feet. The legal fees are killing me, and no one will hire me with this investigation hanging over my head." I studied him, this brother who had once seemed so tall and powerful in my eyes, who had made me feel small and worthless with a few cutting words. Now he was the one asking for a handout, the one desperate and afraid. "No," I said finally. His face hardened. "No? Just like that? After everything I did for you growing up? What exactly did you do for me, Griffin? Besides intercept my college acceptance letters? Besides make me feel like a burden in my own home? Besides throw me out during a storm when I had nowhere else to go?" He paled. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that I do." He slumped back against the bench. "So, this is revenge. You're enjoying seeing me suffer." "No," I said, surprised to find it was true. "I take no pleasure in your pain. But I won't enable you either. You need to face the consequences of your choices." "Easy for you to say," he spat. Standing there looking so put together. "What happened? Found yourself a rich boyfriend? Sleeping your way to security?" The old Griffin, lashing out when cornered. I almost smiled at how predictable he was. "Goodbye, Griffin," I said, turning to leave. "Wait," he called after me. "Please, Odette. I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have said that. I'm desperate." I paused but didn't turn back. "You know what the difference is between us, Griffin? When I was desperate, I asked for shelter. You're asking for a bailout. There are shelters in the city. Resources for people who need help. I suggest you start there." I walked away, his calls fading behind me. I didn't look back. Not out of cruelty, but because looking forward was the only direction that mattered now. That night, I dreamed of my father. We were sitting on the porch of a house I didn't recognize, watching the sunset. He looked just as I remembered him, kind eyes, salt and pepper beard, hands that were always gentle. "You did right, Audie," he said, using the nickname only he had ever called me. "Setting boundaries isn't the same as building walls." "I miss you," I told him. "Every day." "I know, sweetheart. But you're carrying me forward in all the ways that matter." I woke with tears on my face, but a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The dream wasn't real, of course, but the truth in it was. I was carrying my father forward, in my love of words, in my quiet noticing of beauty, in my choice to help others without expectation of credit or return. A week later, I saw Griffin again, this time from across a busy street. He was holding a cardboard sign asking for help. Our eyes met briefly before I moved on. Not out of heartlessness, but because some lessons can only be learned through experience. Griffin had spent a lifetime believing he was above consequences. Perhaps this was the only way he would ever learn differently. That evening, I made an anonymous donation to the city's main homeless shelter, enough to fund their job placement program for a year. If Griffin or others like him truly wanted to rebuild, the resources would be there. The choice, as always, would be theirs. I was never meant to carry the blame for their emptiness. 1 year after winning the lottery, I sat in a lawyer's office, finalizing the paperwork for a new foundation. Not Broken would provide housing and educational support for women over 30 who had experienced emotional abuse and financial hardship. Women who, like me, had found themselves starting over with nothing but their own resilience to guide them. "The anonymity provisions are ironclad," Margaret assured me, sliding the documents across her desk. "Your name won't appear anywhere in the public records." I signed where indicated, a strange sense of completion washing over me. The foundation would start with 3 modest houses in different neighborhoods, each able to accommodate 4 women at a time. Not an empire, not a grand gesture, but meaningful support for those who needed it most. "Are you sure you don't want any recognition?" Margaret asked as we finished. "What you're doing is extraordinary." I shook my head. "The women who stay in these houses will have enough to worry about without feeling indebted to a benefactor. They need to know their recovery belongs to them, not to someone who wrote a check." As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We'd settled into a gentle rhythm over the past months. Weekly calls, monthly visits where I brought homemade soup, well, store-bought, but transferred to my own containers. Careful conversations that skated around difficult topics, but gradually grew more authentic. "The doctor says the new medication is working," she wrote. "Less pain today. Thinking of you." I texted back immediately, "That's wonderful news. See you Sunday." Our relationship would never be what it might have been if she'd protected me from Griffin's manipulations, if she'd seen me clearly from the beginning. But it was something real now, tentative and fragile, but honest in a way it had never been before. Elliot was waiting for me at the cafe around the corner from his bookstore. Our friendship had deepened over the months since my breakdown, evolving into something that defied easy categorization. Not quite romance. We were both too marked by past losses for that, but something equally intimate. A chosen family of 2, gradually expanding to include others who crossed our paths. "How did it go?" he asked as I slid into the seat across from him. "It's done," I said, smiling. "The foundation is official." He raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To new beginnings." "And quiet endings," I added, thinking of the chapter that had closed with those signatures. "Speaking of which," Elliot said, reaching into his messenger bag, "I have something for you." He pulled out a slim volume and handed it to me. It was a poetry chapbook, beautifully bound in soft blue cloth. The cover bore no author name, just a title, "Let the Storm Pass." I opened it to find my own words staring back at me, pieces I'd written over the past year and shared only with Elliot. Poems about grief and resilience, about rain and shelter, about the weight of rejection and the lightness of release. "You didn't," I whispered, tracing the pages with trembling fingers. "Only 200 copies," he said, his eyes warm. "No name, as you requested. Just the words. The first 10 have already sold, by the way." People are asking who wrote them. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you. For seeing this in me. For seeing me. That's the easy part, he said softly. That evening, I added a new ritual to my day. I began writing letters I would never send, to my father, to Griffin, to my 19-year-old self standing at her father's grave wondering how she would survive without him. Dear Dad, I wrote. I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all those years ago. My worth isn't measured by how others treat me, or even by what I achieve. It's in how I move through the world, in the gentleness I choose, in the beauty I notice. I'm carrying you forward in ways I hope would make you proud. To Griffin, I wrote simply, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. May you find your way to whatever healing looks like for you. To my younger self, I wrote promises. The pain doesn't last forever. The loneliness isn't a life sentence. You are not what they called you. You are not what they did to you. You are the quiet strength that survives the storm. 3 months after establishing the foundation, I received an email from its director, Hannah, one of the few people who knew of my involvement. One of our residents asked to share something with the anonymous founder, she wrote. I told her I could pass along a message. This is what she wanted you to know. Attached was a short voice recording. I pressed play with trembling fingers. I don't know who you are, a young woman's voice said, but I need you to know what you did. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in my car after leaving an emotionally abusive relationship. I had no family to turn to, no friends who hadn't given up on me. When I found the not broken house, I thought it was too good to be true. A place where no one asked what I did to deserve what happened to me. Where no one told me I should have tried harder or been smarter. You gave me a place when no one else even saw me. Her voice broke, and I heard her take a deep breath before continuing. I start my new job next week. In 3 months, I'll be moving to my own apartment. I don't know if I'll ever know your name or your story, but I wanted you to know that whatever storm you weathered to create this place, it was worth it. At least for me, it was worth it. Tears streamed down my face as the recording ended. I thought of that night in the motel, soaking wet and utterly alone, staring at the winning lottery numbers in disbelief. How lost I'd felt, how broken. How certain that no one in the world would miss me if I simply disappeared. I wiped my eyes and looked out at the cardinal that still visited my oak tree each morning. Its bright red feathers caught the sunlight as it hopped from branch to branch, free and unhurried. My phone buzzed with a notification. A voicemail from Griffin. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since our encounter in the park. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something made me press play instead. Odette, his voice was slurred, emotional. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. I was cruel to you. My whole life, really, but especially that night. I'm so sorry. I'm in a program now. Trying to get sober. Trying to make amends. I know it's probably too late for us, but I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did. Who I was. If you could find it in your heart to give me a second chance, please call me back. I listened to the message twice, searching for the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But all I heard was genuine remorse. Not enough to erase the past, but perhaps enough to acknowledge it honestly for the first time. I didn't call him back. Not that day. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. It didn't mean I had to let him back into my life or trust him again. It simply meant I was releasing the power his actions had held over me. Later that week, I visited an animal shelter, not the one where I volunteered, but one across town where no one knew me. I walked past cages of barking dogs until I came to a quiet kennel in the back. Inside was a mixed-breed dog with one ear that stood straight up and another that flopped over. He watched me with cautious eyes, neither afraid nor excited. This one's been here a while, the volunteer told me. About 7 months. He was found during that big thunderstorm last year, hiding under a porch. No collar, no chip. No one ever claimed him. I knelt beside the kennel door. What's his name? We've been calling him Lucky, she said. Though he hasn't had much luck getting adopted. Lucky, I repeated softly. The dog's tail gave a single, tentative wag. I think we might be a good match. 2 hours later, Lucky was exploring my apartment, sniffing every corner with methodical attention. He settled finally on the balcony, lying in the patch of sunlight where I often sat to write. I joined him, running my hand over his rough fur. We both made it through the storm, I told him. That's something, isn't it? That evening, as Lucky dozed on the rug beside my chair, I opened my laptop to find an email from a woman I didn't know. The subject line read simply, "Your poem saved me." "I found your chapbook in a small bookstore in Westbrook," she wrote. The one with no author name, just that line on the back about the storm passing. I read it in one sitting, then went back and read it again. How did you know exactly what it feels like? To be discarded by the people who should have caught you? To rebuild from nothing but rain and broken promises? Your words gave shape to things I've never been able to name. I sat back stunned. My words, the ones I'd written in quiet moments, never intending them for anyone but myself, had reached someone. Had mattered to someone. In that moment, I thought of Griffin's words from that night in the storm. Dead weight. The casual cruelty with which he dismissed my existence, my worth. But it turned out I wasn't dead weight at all. I was a life raft for the girl sleeping in her car. I was a voice speaking truth for the woman who'd found my chapbook. I was the daughter my father had always believed in, the friend Elliot treasured, the anonymous benefactor whose quiet gifts rippled outward in ways I might never fully know. I was never meant to carry the blame for their emptiness. Griffin's, my mother's, anyone who had tried to make me smaller to accommodate their own limitations. I was meant to carry forward the light my father had seen in me from the beginning. As the last rays of sunset filtered through my window, I whispered the words that had become my mantra, my truth, my release. He called me dead weight. But it turns out, I was just carrying too many people who couldn't carry me back. Lucky raised his head at the sound of my voice, his mismatched ears perked in attention. I smiled at him, this fellow survivor who had also weathered his storm and emerged, perhaps not unscathed, but unbroken. "It's okay, boy," I said softly. "We're home now." Like and subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, unexpected wealth, and the power of choosing who truly deserves a place in your life. The cardboard box sat on my desk, a flimsy container for 10 years of dedication. Budget cuts. Restructuring. Nothing personal. I nodded mechanically as HR delivered the news, my face a careful mask while inside, everything crumbled. Outside, rain began to fall as I checked my phone. Battery at 12%, bank account at $12.47. Perfect symmetry for a life unraveling. I didn't know then that the worst was yet to come, that my own brother would look me in the eye and call me dead weight before throwing me out into a storm. What Griffin couldn't see, standing in his perfect house with his perfect life, was the lottery ticket tucked in my wallet. The one worth $3.5 million. The one that would free me from ever needing him again. I didn't expect him to carry me. I just thought he might catch me. The silence of the office hallway felt like a physical thing, pressing against my skin as I walked away from what had been my desk for the last 10 years. 10 years at Horizon Publishing, gone in a 15-minute meeting that ended with a cardboard box and a limp handshake from HR. Budget cuts. Restructuring. Nothing personal. The words blurred together as I nodded, trying to keep my face composed. "We'll miss you, Odette," Sarah from marketing said softly, as I passed her desk. I managed a smile that felt like glass in my cheeks. Outside, dark clouds gathered, promising rain. Perfect timing. The universe had a sick sense of humor sometimes. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at my phone. Battery at 12%. Bank account at $12.47. The irony wasn't lost on me. I should take the train home, but something in me rebelled at spending even $3. So I walked, all 27 blocks, as the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time I reached my apartment, my clothes were soaked through, and my hair plastered to my face. The eviction notice taped to my door wasn't unexpected, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. 15 days to pay or vacate. I peeled it off before any neighbors could see, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my pocket. Inside, I set the box down and changed into dry clothes. My apartment was small but had always felt like mine. Now it felt like borrowed space, time ticking away. I opened my laptop and began applying for jobs, sending out resumes into what felt like a void. Publishing jobs were scarce, and everyone wanted younger, fresher faces. Not a 34-year-old editor whose specialty was in print, not digital. Days passed. I rationed my groceries, skipping lunch, so I could stretch what I had. Oatmeal became both breakfast and dinner. I kept up appearances in group texts with former colleagues. Enjoying the break. Already have some interviews lined up, I wrote, the lie burning my fingertips as I typed it. At night, I dreamed of my father. He'd been gone for 15 years now, dying when I was 19 from a heart attack that came without warning. He was the only one who ever really saw me. Mom had always favored Griffin, my older brother, by 6 years. Griffin was the golden child, captain of the debate team, straight-A student, and now a successful financial advisor with a picture-perfect life. Dad used to find me hiding in the attic when Griffin's teasing became too much. Never beg people to care, Odette, he'd say, his voice gentle as he brushed my hair back from my face. Your worth isn't measured by how others treat you. I wondered what he'd say now, seeing me scraping the bottom of the peanut butter jar, trying to make it last one more day. When the electricity shut off on day 7 after losing my job, I knew I'd run out of options. I stared at my phone, finger hovering over Griffin's contact. We hadn't spoken in months, not since Christmas, when he'd spent the entire dinner talking about his new boat and how I should really consider a career change before publishing dies completely. As if I hadn't dedicated my entire adult life to it. I pressed call before I could change my mind. Odette. His voice was sharp, surprised. It's the middle of a workday. I know. I'm sorry, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. I lost my job, and I'm about to lose my apartment. The silence stretched for so long I thought he'd hung up. Griffin. I'm here.
A sigh.
Fine, come by. Just for a few days, though. We have the Anderson dinner party on Saturday. Thank you, I whispered, but he'd already ended the call. I packed one suitcase and a backpack. 10 years of working, and this was what I had to show for it. The photo of Dad and me at the lake. A few books I couldn't bear to part with.
Clothes.
My laptop. I took one last look around the apartment that had been my home for 7 years before closing the door. Griffin lived in an expansive house in the suburbs, all white walls and gleaming surfaces. His wife, Brin, opened the door when I arrived. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Odette, it's been a while. She glanced at my single suitcase, and I saw relief flicker across her face at how little I'd brought. Just for a few days, right? Griffin mentioned your in-between things. In-between things? Like I was on vacation. Not desperate. Yes, I said. Just until I figure something out. Griffin appeared behind her, dress shirt perfectly pressed despite it being nearly 7 p.m. You can take the couch, he said by way of greeting. We converted the guest room into Brin's yoga studio last year. No, I'm sorry about your job. Just the couch, in the formal living room where they never actually sat. Thank you, I said, the words feeling hollow. I appreciate this. Well, Griffin said, checking his watch, we were just about to eat. I ordered from that Thai place. There should be enough. The dinner was excruciating. Griffin talked about his latest big client while Brin scrolled through her phone. Neither asked me a single question about what had happened or how I was feeling. I pushed pad thai around my plate and tried to make myself as small as possible. After they went upstairs, I made up the couch with the single sheet and thin blanket Brin had left for me. I stared up at the vaulted ceiling, feeling like an intruder in a museum. Sleep didn't come until well past midnight. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee, hoping to show my gratitude by having it ready. Griffin came down at 6:30, looked at the coffee pot, and poured the entire thing out. We only drink the single-origin Ethiopian, he said, pulling a bag from a cabinet I hadn't opened. This pre-ground stuff will ruin the machine. It set the tone for the days that followed. Every move I made was wrong. My clothes were too casual. My voice was too loud on phone interviews. I was taking too long in the bathroom. I was using too much hot water. I wasn't trying hard enough to find a job. Maybe if you'd gotten that MBA like I suggested instead of sticking with that dying industry, Griffin said on the fourth night as I sat on the couch, scrolling through job listings. You always make things harder for yourself. I bit my tongue. He'd been saying variations of this since I was 12 and chose art class over math club, always implying I was choosing failure, when really, I was just choosing my own path. On the fifth day, I was sitting on the back porch, making notes for an upcoming interview, when Griffin appeared in the doorway. His face was tight, eyes cold. Brin's mother is coming this weekend, he said without preamble. She'll need the living room. You can't stay here anymore. I blinked, looking up from my laptop. I thought you said I could have a few weeks. I said a few days. It's been almost a week. Look, Odette, he crossed his arms, you're just dead weight. Always have been. Dad babied you, and now you expect everyone else to pick up the slack. I have my own life to worry about. Dead weight. The words hit like physical blows. I'd heard variations from him before, that I was too sensitive, too impractical, too much work, but never so directly, so cruelly. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. I'll be gone within the hour. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. And, maybe next time, have an emergency fund like an adult. I packed methodically, folding each item with precise movements, while tears blurred my vision. Outside, rain had started again, heavy and insistent.
Of course it would rain.
Of course I would be leaving in another storm. I called for a ride, the cheapest option to the nearest motel I could find online. Griffin and Brin were in the kitchen when I came downstairs, speaking in hushed tones that cut off when they saw me. Your ride is here, Griffin said, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak.
No will be.
No good luck. Just the sound of the front door closing behind me with a final click. The Pinewood Motel was exactly as depressing as its 2-star rating suggested. Water stains on the ceiling. A bedspread that had seen better days in the previous decade. But it was shelter, and at $59 a night, it would drain what little remained of my savings within days. I sat on the edge of the bed, my wet clothes leaving damp patches on the covers. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. This was rock bottom. This was what asking Griffin for help had gotten me, deeper in the hole, with a fresh wound carved into whatever remained of my self-worth. I reached into my backpack for my wallet and felt something crinkle. A lottery ticket, purchased weeks ago on a whim when the jackpot had climbed to record heights. I'd completely forgotten about it. With nothing better to do, I pulled out my phone and checked the numbers against the winning combination. The first number matched, then the second. By the fourth, my hand was shaking so badly I could barely read the ticket. When all 6 numbers aligned with the winning combination, I stopped breathing entirely. I double-checked.
Triple-checked.
Frantically Googled to confirm the jackpot amount. $3.5 million. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just cried, silent, heaving sobs that bet me double on that musty motel bed. Not because I was suddenly rich, but because in that moment I realized I didn't need Griffin anymore. I would never again have to hear him call me dead weight. I would never have to beg for his help or approval or love. I was free. Money doesn't erase the ache. It just gives it a quieter room to live in. The first thing I did the next morning wasn't what you might expect. I didn't rush out to buy a mansion or a sports car. I didn't quit job hunting or post my win on social media. Instead, I called a lawyer, one whose name I'd found after hours of research during the night. Someone who specialized in lottery winners and financial privacy. We'll set up an anonymous trust, Margaret Winters explained, her voice calm and steady during our meeting. Your name will never be public. We'll arrange for the lump sum payment, and I've contacted a financial advisor who works specifically with sudden wealth clients. I nodded, still feeling disconnected from reality. No one can know. Not even family. Not unless you tell them, she assured me. New York is one of the states that allows complete anonymity for lottery winners. Smart choice, by the way. The horror stories I've heard from clients in states without that protection. I thought of Griffin, of how he'd react if he knew. Would he apologize? Try to insert himself back into my life? The thought made my stomach turn. I want to keep it completely private, I said firmly. 2 weeks later, after all the paperwork and financial arrangements, I had access to my new wealth, $1.9 million after taxes and the lump sum reduction. It still felt like monopoly money, numbers on a screen that couldn't possibly be real. I found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood called Westbrook, not too far from where I'd lived before, but far enough from Griffin's suburb that I wouldn't risk running into him or Brin. It was a one-bedroom with big windows and a small balcony that caught the morning sun. I paid 6 months' rent in advance, but resisted the urge to buy the place outright. My financial advisor, Thomas, had been clear. Don't make major decisions in the first year. Get your bearings first. I bought used furniture, a comfortable blue couch, a sturdy oak table, bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed lottery winner. Just a home that felt like mine in a way my previous apartment never quite had. At night, though, the quiet became oppressive. I'd find myself sitting on the balcony until dawn, replaying Griffin's words. Dead weight. The way he'd looked at me, like I was a stranger who'd imposed on his hospitality, not his only sister who'd come to him in desperation. It wasn't new, this dismissal. Griffin had always seen me as an inconvenience. When we were children, he'd lock me out of his room when I'd come to him with nightmares. Go bother Dad, he'd say. You're always crying about something. Mom would smooth it over. He's busy with school, Odette. You need to be more independent. Independence became my armor early. I stopped asking for help with homework. Stopped telling them when kids at school were cruel. Stopped expecting to be included in family conversations. Except with Dad. He'd find me hiding in my room or up in the attic space where I'd created a little reading nook with pillows stolen from the living room sofa. Room for another misfit? He'd ask and I'd scoot over so he could sit beside me. We'd read together or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. He never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. He was the buffer between me and the rest of the family, the translator who could somehow make Mom see me, even if just for a moment. When he died, that buffer vanished. I was in my second year of college, studying literature and dreaming of working in publishing. Griffin was already establishing himself in finance, already married to his college sweetheart Brin, already the perfect son carrying on the family legacy. I came home from the funeral to find Mom going through Dad's office with Griffin, sorting what to keep and what to discard. I stood in the doorway, watching as they methodically emptied the space that had been so sacred to me. What about his notebooks? I asked, pointing to the stack of leather-bound journals Dad had filled with sketches and thoughts. Just old work notes, Mom said dismissively. Nothing worth keeping. I'd taken them anyway, smuggling them out in my suitcase when I returned to school. They'd moved with me from dorm room to first apartment to every place after. And now, they sat on my new bookshelf, the only real treasures I owned. I pulled one down now, opening to a random page. Dad's handwriting flowed across the paper, alongside a sketch of a bird perched on a fence post. Saw a cardinal today. Thought of Odette, always looking for the flash of color in a gray world. Tears pricked my eyes. I flipped through more pages, finding notes about work meetings interspersed with observations about nature, quotes from books he was reading, and occasional mentions of Griffin's accomplishments or my latest letter from college. Tucked between the pages of the last journal was an unfinished letter, dated 3 weeks before his death. It was addressed to me. My dearest Odette, I watched you leave for school yesterday with such a mixture of pride and worry. Pride because you shine so brightly when you're doing what you love. Worry because I know not everyone sees that light in you. Your mother and brother speak a different language than we do, always have. They measure success in such concrete terms, grades, awards, salary. You were always the light, even when they wouldn't see it. Your way of looking at the world, finding beauty in small moments, feeling everything so deeply, that's not weakness. It's a gift. A rare one. I know it hurts when they dismiss it, when they try to reshape you into something more practical, more like them. I need you to know that you don't have to change. Not for them, Not for anyone. The world needs people who feel deeply, who notice the cardinal on the fence post, who remember the names of flowers, who cry at both sad and happy endings in books. I worry sometimes what will happen when the letter ended there, mid-thought. What had he worried about? What had he wanted to tell me? The questions haunted me as I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its place in the journal. Weeks passed in my new apartment. I started therapy, but found myself unable to speak about what had happened with Griffin. I'd sit in Dr. Mercer's office, staring at the abstract painting on her wall, answering her questions with vague half-truths. Yes, I was adjusting to unemployment. No, I wasn't in contact with my family currently. Yes, I had enough savings to get by for now. I never mentioned the lottery. Never mentioned the storm or Griffin's cutting words. It felt too raw, too tender to expose to analysis. Instead, I found myself volunteering at a local animal shelter. I gave them a different name, Lisa Evans, and spent my Saturday mornings cleaning cages and walking dogs. The animals didn't care who I was or where my money came from. They just wanted gentle hands and kind words, things I could provide without fear of judgment. It was at the shelter that I began my quiet acts of kindness. I overheard Marlene, one of the other volunteers, talking about her son's medical bills. He needed a specialized procedure that insurance wouldn't fully cover. $20,000, she said, shaking her head as she filled water bowls. Might as well be $20 million for all I can afford it. The next day, the shelter received an anonymous donation earmarked specifically for employees and volunteers' emergency needs. Marlene's son got his procedure. I watched from a distance as she showed everyone pictures of him recovering in the hospital, her face alight with relief and gratitude. It became a pattern. At the grocery store, I'd pay for the cart of the elderly woman behind me in line. I'd leave $100 tips for food delivery drivers. Once, I heard a college student on the phone in a cafe, panicking about tuition. I arranged for an anonymous scholarship through the university's financial aid office. These weren't grand gestures. I wasn't building wings of hospitals or funding research. Just small moments of relief in individual lives. It didn't erase my pain, but it gave it purpose. A way to ensure that what I'd felt that night in the motel, that utter aloneness, might be eased for someone else. I was returning books to the local bookstore when I first met Elliot. He was tall and lanky, with salt and pepper hair despite appearing to be only in his early 40s. He wore reading glasses perched perpetually on top of his head, rarely where they belonged on his nose. "You're back," he said, smiling as he took the stack of novels from me. "Third time this week. Either you're the fastest reader in Westbrook, or you're not finishing these." I felt myself flush. I finished them. I just read quickly. He studied me for a moment, then reached under the counter and pulled out a slim volume. "Try this one."
Poetry.
Forces you to slow down. It was Mary Oliver's Wild Geese. I'd read it before, but didn't say so. Something about the gentle way he'd handed it to me made me want to accept this small offering. "Thank you," I said, taking the book.
I'm ikot myself. Lisa.
"Elliot," he replied, not seeming to notice my stumble. "This place is mine, for better or worse." Mostly worse, according to my accountant. I smiled, a genuine one that surprised me with how easily it came. Independent bookstores are fighting the good fight. "Someone has to," he shrugged. "Though between us, I could keep the lights on just fine without ever selling another book. My wife left me very well insured when she passed." The casual mention of his loss silenced me. He noticed.
Saw the
5 years now, and I still dropped that into conversations like a brick. Rebecca would laugh at me. She always said I had the social grace of a distracted professor. "I don't mind," I said softly. "It's real." Something shifted in his expression then, a recognition of sorts. "You too, huh? The membership club no one wants to join." I nodded, not specifying what I'd lost. It wasn't the same as losing a spouse, but grief recognized grief. "Well, Lisa who reads too fast, the poetry's on the house. Just promise you'll actually sit with it. One poem at a time." That night, I did as he suggested. I read Wild Geese slowly, then again, then a third time. The line that caught in my throat. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I returned to the bookstore 2 days later. Elliot was helping another customer, but he nodded when he saw me, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I browsed until the store emptied. Verdict, he asked, leaning against the counter. You were right, I admitted. Poetry needs to be read slowly. A rare victory for the bookseller. Usually, I'm told I'm right about exactly nothing. He pulled another book from beneath the counter. Try this next. Billy Collins. Less reverent, but no less true. It became our ritual. Every few days, I'd return with the previous book, and he'd have another waiting. We never spoke at length, just brief exchanges about the poems, occasional observations about the weather or local news. It was the most honest relationship in my life, despite being built on my false name. One evening, scrolling through social media, a habit I was trying to break, I came across Brin's latest Instagram post. It was a photo of her at some charity luncheon, perfectly coiffed and smiling. The caption read, "Another successful fundraiser for children in need. So important to give back, though I firmly believe in helping those who help themselves. No one owes you comfort or a handout in this world. Hashtag blessed, hashtag giving back, hashtag personal responsibility." The hypocrisy burned. This from the woman who'd watched her husband throw his own sister out in a storm, who'd stood silently by as he'd called me dead weight, who'd never once asked if I was okay. I wrote a letter that night, pouring out everything I'd held back. How Griffin's cruelty had cut deeper than he could know. How I'd sat in that motel room, soaking wet and utterly alone, and discovered I was worth millions. How I could buy their house 10 times over now but wouldn't spend a penny to be in their presence again. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the pages were spotted with tears. Then I took the letter to my small balcony, struck a match, and watched it burn down to ash. As the last ember died, I made a silent vow to myself. I would never explain myself to Griffin or anyone for my past again. I would build my life in quiet, deliberate peace. And they could watch from the outside, if they bothered to look at all. You can't throw someone away and expect them to wait on the curb for your apology. 3 months after winning the lottery, I'd established a routine that felt almost normal. Mornings at the local cafe, with a book. Afternoons volunteering or taking long walks through Westbrook's tree-lined streets. Evenings on my balcony, sometimes with takeout from the Thai place around the corner, sometimes with another volume of poetry from Elliot's seemingly endless recommendations. I'd started writing again, too, something I hadn't done since college. Nothing serious, just observations in a journal similar to Dad's. The cardinal that made its home in the oak tree outside my window. The way raindrops caught the sunset's light. Small moments that would have once seemed insignificant, but now felt like anchors to the present. I was in the middle of such an entry when my phone buzzed with a text from an old colleague, Vanessa. "Have you heard about Griffin Taylor? His firm is under investigation. It's all over the financial news sites." My stomach dropped. Griffin and I shared a last name, uncommon enough that anyone who knew me would make the connection. I quickly searched his name and found several articles detailing allegations of mismanagement and possible fraud at his financial advisory firm. According to the reports, a routine audit had uncovered irregularities in how client funds were being invested. One client, a retired school principal, had filed a lawsuit claiming Griffin had misrepresented investment risks, resulting in substantial losses to her retirement savings. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not concern. Just a hollow acknowledgement that Griffin's perfect facade was cracking. I didn't reply to Vanessa's text. 2 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me to swipe. "Hello. Odette? It's Aunt Meredith. My father's sister. We hadn't spoken since Dad's funeral, when she'd hugged me tightly and whispered that I could call her anytime. I never had. Aunt Meredith," I said, surprised. "How are you?" "Oh, getting by. These old knees don't take kindly to the stairs anymore." Her laugh was warm, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "I've been thinking about you, especially with all this business with your brother in the news." "I've heard a little," I said cautiously.
Um,
The sound was non-committal, but knowing. I wondered if you might have. Listen, I'm in town for a few days, visiting an old friend from college. Could we meet for coffee? I have something of your father's I've been meaning to give you. We arranged to meet the following afternoon at a small cafe near her friend's home. I arrived early, claiming a quiet table in the corner. When she walked in, I was struck by how much she resembled Dad. The same kind eyes, the same slight tilt of the head when she spotted me. "Odette," she said, embracing me. "You look just like him." We ordered coffee and spent the first few minutes on safe topics: her retirement in Arizona, her volunteer work at the Desert Botanical Gardens, her granddaughter's college plans. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wooden box. "I found this when I was cleaning out some old storage boxes," she said, sliding it across the table. "James gave it to me for safekeeping after you left for college. Said you might need it someday, but the timing never felt right to send it." I opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small star pendant and an envelope addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. "He was so proud of you," Aunt Meredith said softly. "You used to call me just to read me your letters from school. The way you described the campus in autumn, your thoughts on the books you were reading, he said you had a writer's soul." I touched the necklace gently. "I never knew he talked about me to anyone." "Oh, constantly. Drove your mother crazy sometimes." She took a sip of her coffee. "Did you know he wanted to be a writer himself? Before he met your mother, and took the accounting job to support the family." I shook my head, surprised. Dad had always encouraged my love of books, but he never mentioned writing aspirations of his own. "Your brother takes after your mother that way," she continued, her tone carefully neutral. "Very practical people." Something in her voice made me look up sharply. "What aren't you saying, Aunt Meredith?" She sighed, setting down her cup. "I promised myself I wouldn't get into old family business. But seeing you now, and knowing what I know about Griffin's situation, I think you deserve the truth about a few things." She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Did you ever wonder why you didn't get into Northwestern? Your dream school?" The question caught me off guard. They rejected me. I wasn't what they were looking for.
No, Odette.
They accepted you. Full scholarship to their creative writing program. I felt like the air had been sucked from the room.
What?
No, I never got any acceptance letter. I would have remembered, because you never saw it. Her eyes held mine steadily. Griffin intercepted your mail that spring. Your acceptance package from Northwestern, and offers from 3 other schools. He told your mother you weren't college material, that you'd waste the money. And then he convinced her that the local state school was all you needed, all you could handle. The world tilted sideways. "How do you know this?" "James told me. He found out too late, after you'd already enrolled in the state school. He confronted Griffin, but the damage was done. They had a huge fight about it. Your mother took Griffin's side, as usual. Said James was babying you, setting you up for disappointment in the real world." I thought of the unfinished letter in Dad's journal. I worry sometimes what will happen when he wasn't there to protect me from them anymore. Why would Griffin do that? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Griffin had always resented any attention Dad gave me. Any success I might have had that would draw focus from his achievements. Your brother has always been. Aunt Meredith chose her words carefully, threatened by the possibility of you outshining him. Especially in your father's eyes. We sat in silence for several minutes as I absorbed this revelation. All these years, I'd believed I wasn't good enough for my dream school. That rejection had shaped so many of my choices afterward, settling for a smaller publishing house, not applying for more prestigious positions, always assuming I was reaching beyond my grasp. "I should have told you sooner," Aunt Meredith said finally. "But after James died, you seemed so determined to make your own way. And then years passed, and it felt too late to open old wounds." "It's not your fault," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Thank you for telling me now." As we prepared to leave, she touched my arm gently. "One more thing. Your mother's been asking about you. She's not well, Odette. Her arthritis has gotten worse, and there's been some concern about early cognitive decline. She keeps saying she needs to apologize to you. I felt a complicated surge of emotions, resentment, pity, a stubborn flicker of daughterly concern. Did Griffin tell her to call me? No. Aunt Meredith's expression hardened slightly. From what I understand, Griffin told her you'd abandoned the family, that you never returned her calls because you were selfish. When I told her I was coming to town and hoped to see you, she broke down crying, said she hadn't heard from you in years and assumed you wanted nothing to do with her. Another lie. I hadn't received a call from my mother in over 2 years. I took Aunt Meredith's hand. Thank you for telling me. All of it. You're so like him, she said, smiling sadly. James would be proud of the woman you've become. That evening, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Mom. I stared at it for several rings before answering.